The introduction to Surah 81 is, you know, the continuing of the commentary from the meaning of the Holy Quran by Abdullah Yusuf Ali. Al-Takwir. So this is 29 verses. And the folding up. This is quite an early Meccan surah, perhaps the 6th or 7th in chronological order. It opens with a series of highly graphic images portraying the breakup of the world as we know it, verses 1 through 13, and the enforcement of complete personal responsibility for each soul, verse 14. This is followed by a passage showing how the Quranic revelation was true and revealed through the angel Gabriel, and not merely a rhapsody from a demonically possessed individual. Revelation is given for man's spiritual guidance, verses 14 through 29. And some would say, oh, it's not a demon that possesses me. Okay, well, it kind of is, just because it's not like tooth and fangs or whatever you expect a demon to be. If it's not on the side of God, if it's not, but the introduction to Surah 82, Al-Infitar. And this has 19 verses. So in subject matter, this surah is cognate to the last, though the best authorities consider it a good deal later in chronology in the early Meccan period. Its argument is to the threefold interpretation mentioned in regards to Surah 81, 13, as referring to the final judgment, the lesser judgment on an individual's death, and to the awakening of inner light in the soul at any time, that being considered as death to the falsities of this life and a rebirth to the true spiritual reality. And so then we continue on to the introduction of Surah 83, Al-Mutaffifin, so the dealers in fraud. This surah is close in time to the last one and the next one. It condemns all fraud in daily dealings as well as, and especially in matters of religion and higher spiritual life. And this is 36 verses here. And then we arrive at the introduction to Surah 84, Al-Inshiqaq. And that's the rending asunder. Chronologically, this surah is closely connected with the last one. In subject matter, it resembles more Surah 82 and 81, with which it may be compared. The surah, which opens with a mention of some cataclysmic events, shows that the present phenomenal order will not last, and Allah's full judgment will certainly be established. Man should therefore strive for that world of eternity and values of truth. And had to change that a little bit because I was not sure what's Introduction and summary to Surah 85, Al-Buruj, the constellations. And this has 22 verses. This is one of the earlier Meccan Suwar, chronologically cognate with Surah 91. The subject matter is the persecution of God's votaries. God watches over his own and will deal with the enemies of truth as he deals with them in the past. And then we move on to the introduction and summary to Surah 85, Al-Tariq. And this is 17 verses, which is interesting considering certain things, right? Um, this surah also belongs to the early Meccan period, perhaps not far removed from the last surah. Its subject matter is the protection afforded to every soul in the darkest period of its spiritual history. The physical nature of man may be insignificant, but the soul given to him by God must win a glorious future in the end. So the night star, the path star, the piercing star, it's the knocking star. It's interesting, those two chapters, the meanings that can be connected to it. Surah 87 and 88 are particularly good ones to say during the holiday prayers, for the first of the 10th month after the sun has risen, and likewise on the 10th of the 12th month. So, I mean, others can be recited, but those are actually of the traditional use. So there's more merit of them. This is one of the earliest Meccan Suwar, being usually placed 8th in chronological order and immediately after Surah 81. The argument is that God has made humans capable of progress by ordered steps, and by his revelation will lead him still higher to perfection and purification. And so that's 19 verses. So 17 is the number of the obliged bows of prayer every day. So after the Most High, we arrive at the introduction and summary to Surah 88, Al-Ghashiyah. This is a late surah of the early Meccan period, perhaps close in date to Surah 53. Its subject matter is the contrast between the destinies of the good and the evil in the hereafter. On the day when the true balance will be restored, the signs of God, even in this life, should remind us of the day of account. For God is good and just, and his creation is for a just purpose. And after the 26 verses of the overwhelming event, we arrive at the introduction and summary to Surah 89, Al-Fajr. So, the dawn. The horizontal lines of twilight appear. This is one of the earliest of the Suwar to be revealed, probably within the first 10 in chronological order. And it'd be very fitting if it was like number 10, right? Its mystic meaning is suggested by contrast in nature and humans' long history. Gender neutral stuff being said here. We're not saying, God's male, or we're not saying that it's only addressing males or anything like that. Thus does it enforce the lesson of faith in the hereafter to those who understand. Man's history and legendary lore shows that the greatness does not last, and the proudest are brought low. For enforcing moral and spiritual truths, the strictest history is no better than legend. Indeed, all artistic history is legend, for it is written from a special point of view. Man is easily cowed by contrast to his own fortunes, and yet he does not learn from them the lesson of forbearance and kindness to others, and the final elevation of goodness in the hereafter, when all the things on which his mind and heart are set on this earth shall be crushed to nothingness. He will see the real glory and power, love and beauty of God. These are the light of the Garden of Paradise. And moving on here to the introduction and summary of Surah 90, Al-Balad. This is an early Meccan revelation and refers to the mystic relation by divine sanction of the Holy Prophet with the city of Mecca. He was born in that city, which had already been sacred for ages before. He was nurtured in that city and had, to use a modern phrase, the freedom of that city, belonging as he did to the noble family which held the government of its sacred precincts in its hands. But he was an orphan, and orphans in his day had a poor time. But his mind was turned to things divine. He protested against the prevailing idolatry and sin, and his parent city persecuted him and cast him out. He made another city, Yathrib, his own. It became the Medinat an-Nabi, the city of the prophet, and it has ever since been called Medina. We can speak of Medina as the prophet's child. But the prophet ever cherished in his heart the love of his parent city, of Mecca, and in the fullness of time was received in triumph there. He purified it from all idols and abominations, reestablished the worship of the one true God, overthrew the purse-proud, selfish autocracy, restored the sway of the righteous people, the right hand. We're not talking right-hand path, left-hand path here. That's something different. The liberty of the slave and the rights of the poor and downtrodden. What a wonderful career centering round a city. It becomes a symbol of the world's spiritual history. So this would be 20 verses and previous 30 verses. And so we would move on. And I said right and left-hand path, right? The right-hand path and left-hand path. The right-hand path you bring in, the left-hand path you bring out. You really can't tell in most instances from one or the other, from the externals. But assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.